Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the program this evening. Good evening, Prof.
Good evening. How are you?
Fine, thank you, Prof. I hear there's been a bit of a downpour in your location today.
Well, yeah, showers of blessing on the righteous, I suppose we'll call it.
Prof, yes, we agree with that. Yes, sir. Well, I guess what do we say about those of us who don't have the showers on this end?
No comment.
All right, Prof. Let's get straight into the questions today. Prof, last week there was a question we wanted to take that we couldn't address because we ran out of time. And that was this issue of one of the largest pro-democracy media outlets in Hong Kong shutting down its operations because the government had frozen its assets. Now, Apple Daily was one of the mainstream ones there. Prof, what is your view on this sort of clamp down that we're seeing? Because we're starting to see this not just Hong Kong, China, across different countries where people and our governments are bringing in laws to, some may say, a sense of gagging the press. What is your view on this?
Well, I wish we had the mechanism to play back some of my comments on issues which had been raised several months ago. I warned on this Hong Kong pro-democracy movement that the activities were getting out of hand. To me, it's a sign of childishness when you don't do a correct evaluation of your opponent, but you behave as if you are the only boxer in the ring. There was, you see, let's be fair. There was a time the pro-democracy movement in Hong Kong lost its head, breaking windows of factories, of shops, of what have you. They simply went mad. And I thought elders who were on their side, who could have cautioned that this was bound, that the only way this will end would be provoking China into doing what maybe China will have done this in 5 years' time. Who knows? Maybe a new set of leaders will have come in Peking, in some who will have rethought the whole situation. But it was as if the pro-democracy movement wanted a showdown that you couldn't win. Now, where are some of them? In fact, where are most of them? They took flight and they've been granted, they're in exile in Europe, especially in Britain. A few who were trying to escape to Taiwan were caught, and really only a handful remained in Hong Kong and were prepared to face the consequences. And unfortunately, the press had become a victim of this. I salute the courage of the proprietor of the newspaper. He's going to lose a lot. He's going to lose probably the totality of his investment. And there was an interview with a lady Democrat in Hong Kong. And let me, for people who might not have listened to her interview, let me, in words, use her comments. She said, well, in other parts of the world, there are people swimming in rivers of blood for freedom and democracy. There are people who are in jail. We in Hong Kong are not less brave. And that to me, and she was still staying in Hong Kong, that to me was a mature point of view rather than all those young people who were busy turning Hong Kong upside down. Let me make things very clear, and I've said this several times. I do not approve of what China has done in Hong Kong. But I am not aware of any part of the world where you have one country, two systems, whether of law or two systems of the economy or what have you. Obviously, we are not talking about a federal system. This was a peculiar system, frankly, that China used to hoodwink the British. The British knew there was no way they were going to face down China when it came to Hong Kong. And so they came to a form of words that will allow Britain to leave Hong Kong and save its face. It wasn't going to work. And it should have been made clear rather than people in Westminster egging on all those young boys and girls who probably were not conversant with systems of government into believing that one country, two systems was a workable contraption. Well, it wasn't. And I'm surprised that it has actually lasted this long. So that's as far as Hong Kong is concerned. Now you expanded your question to include other countries where they are cracking down on the media. The media had always been cracked down upon, always. I remember during what the British called troubles in Northern Ireland under Margaret Thatcher, the press, including the international press, was forbidden to interview the leaders on the Catholic side and to air their interviews. They were forbidden and they complied. So, wherever a country is faced with maybe existential, problems, the first thing it tries to do, or not the first thing, but somewhere along the line, it tries to make sure that the people it perceives as posing this threat does not get a free run with the media. And please let us face it, journalists uh, journalists have really become aggressive journalists. Maybe not in their own country, maybe when the issues are in another country. They've become aggressive, pugnacious journalists. I couldn't believe my ears when I saw the way some of the American journalists insulted Putin. And he just laughed and, let the insult pass. Well, obviously, Russian journalists are not going to insult Putin and be on the same plane back with him to Moscow. And one remembers the war relationship between Trump and the American press. And there are once during that last trip to Europe, the American press did provoke Biden. And of course, unfortunately, he went back and apologized. Because if you want to survive as a politician in the United States, you won't take on the American press. The American journalists are a bunch of well, let me not provoke them if there's any of them listening to this. But the relationship between the press and government will always be a tendentious one.
Yes, Prof. And Prof, that leads us to the situation in Eswatini, because we're saying that people are calling for democracy. The cry there is also democracy. We need political reform. We want to be governed by a system that some seem to think is probably the best for the world at this point in time. And Prof, this is a 53-year-old king who's been on the throne for about 35 years. And the question people are asking is this: is it about time that we bring an end to absolute monarchy as we have it at Eswatini? What are your views on that, Prof?
Well, I think that absolute monarchy is an anachronism. Anywhere in the world, not only in and I knew it as Swaziland, so forgive me if I can't pronounce the name Swaziti or that kind of thing. The same thing is going on in Thailand. And people have been out on the streets for over a year calling for a constitutional monarchy in Thailand. Unfortunately, the problem is not even with the absolute monarchy in Swaziland. The problem also is with the behavior of the king has been atrocious. Well, maybe it's their culture, but remember the reed dance. That's what they call it. The reed dance every year where the king picks a new bride. And young ladies, dance for the king in a stadium, the public stadium, and that's how and where he then ends up picking the bride for the year. Now, when I was a minister, incidentally, I was invited not by this one. I think it was his father, who complained that no Nigerian president or minister, for that matter, had ever, visited what was called Swaziland, at that time, and invited me to come and come during the annual Reed Festival, where I didn't go simply because it didn't fit into my program before I left office. Now, it was explained to me at that time that picking a new bride every year was a way of the king cementing, his relationship with the various segments of the country, and thereby maintaining the stability. Well, I thought better ways of doing that, but this king had shown a crude pattern of behavior, and I was certain that sooner or later people were going to rise against it. In a country that's so poor, at that time the problem was HIV, and yet the king had a private jet, Rolls Royce, new vehicles every year. His pattern of lifestyle was, appalling. So I'm not surprised that this finally, in a way, what's going to happen in Swaziland depends on South Africa, because without the support, military support, economic support from South Africa, Swaziland will have disappeared a long time ago. So the outcome of what's going on now is going to depend on, what Cyril Ramaphosa decides to do. But sooner or later, absolute monarchs will be a thing of the past.
Thank you for that, Prof. You've mentioned South Africa there, and maybe it's a good opportunity to bring in this point around COVID vaccines. South Africa has entered into another round of lockdown due to the increase in the Delta variant of COVID. But more importantly, one of the things that we are seeing, Prof, is many of the vaccines donated to African countries are not being recognized by EU for people to travel to parts of the EU. What do you say to that point specifically, Prof?
Well, as somebody who has taken both jabs from the AstraZeneca vaccine, both jabs coming from the stock produced by China and supplied to us in Africa by the World Health Organization, I feel terribly offended by the decision of the EU. unless the EU can produce evidence that what was produced in India is substandard, then I regard the action of the EU as racist. Now, each time a man of color, and that's what I am, talks about systemic racism, oh, here they go again. What's he talking about? What's systemic racism? Well, let the EU explain what WHO approved and bought under license from Great Britain, where the vaccine was originally produced. Let the EU explain to me why you will now say to the world that the vaccine that was sent to Africa and that was used to vaccinate Africans is now not approved for travel to the European Union countries. Are you now saying that if we want to travel to Europe, we must now get another set of vaccines? I mean, first of all, would that be safe? 4 doses of vaccine just to travel to Europe within 1 year? Would that be safe? Is that what they are telling us? How will you describe, first of all, their characterization of what's produced in India? Millions of Indians themselves have used this. Millions of Africans have used this. I'm appalled at the decision of the EU. And yet, before you know it, the EU will be hosting a conference of all African leaders, and all our leaders will troop to, whether it is France or Germany or Italy or where, they will troop there to join in, not even join decision making, to listen to decisions which have been taken out, to which they're supposed to show obedience. I think that I was waiting. I've been waiting for the World Health Organization itself to speak out since this decision was made. It hasn't spoken out, and yet it is headed by an African, an Ethiopian, even though I'm aware that there are several high-level officials, again, including Indians, who work for the World Health Organization. But well, I don't know. I think if I were an African leader, I will look for good lawyers in the EU and sue the European Union to the World Court for. I'm sure the lawyers will come up with a litany of things, of accusations that could be leveled against them. But really, I'm not happy about this at all.
Yes, Prof. You talked about WHO responding. Should India respond as well in this case? And should the WHO also be saying other countries where the same bat from India had gone should also be barred from entering into the EU?
Yeah. No, look, there are a whole lot of things that nation states can do to show their displeasure. For example, retaliation. We are not going to, you could say, we will not allow Europeans who took other vaccines from coming into our countries. Number 2, you could say that their businessmen will not be welcomed in our country, unless you can prove to the world that your decision is not based on racist grounds. You are quite right. I expect India to have spoken up as well. And but nobody is saying anything. Nobody. Nigeria is not saying anything. South Africa, that had used also, they're not saying anything. So now I know the African Union, I'm not sure where they are getting their own supply of vaccines from. I'm not sure. But that is even irrelevant. There are your member countries who have been supplied these vaccines by the World Health Organization. So the AU should speak up on our behalf. But again, the African Union is not saying anything. It's not saying anything.
Yes, Prof. There's quite a lot happening in Africa, Prof. And another one that has hit us this week is again coming from South Africa, and that is the 15-month jail term that has been handed down to former President Zuma of South Africa for not showing up to court for the allegations against him. Prof, this is a former president. He's already said things had not been fair in this election. But should he have been given this kind of sentence?
Why not? Why not? In Israel, because as you were raising your question, I thought I knew where you were going. Israel has jailed, I think one, it could be more than one, presidents before, and the heavens didn't fall. Normally, we've been accusing Africa of making semi-gods, if not full gods, of their presidents or prime ministers. And because of the anti-apartheid struggle in South Africa, their judicial system has shown a robustness which I haven't found in the judicial systems of other African countries. And so I salute and I applaud the South African judicial system for doing this. It will be a signal to all future presidents of South Africa that, as the judge said, no one is above the law. And should one person, irrespective of who he is, pick and choose which court to attend and which law to obey, then the paper on which the South African Constitution is written not be worth that paper. That's what the judge said, and I applaud her courage. And incidentally, today she's come under severe attacks by supporters of Zuma. I hope her colleagues will come to her defense. But it's not just the impact in South Africa alone. I also hope it sends a signal to other African countries, president countries, that your own judicial system may sooner or later catch up with the standard which the South African system has just set. So I also hope so that you don't think it's only Africa that needs to have another look at its own judicial system. The United States has never sent a president or a minister, co-secretary to prison, even in spite of the atrocious behavior of one or two that we can easily mention that comes to mind, both from recent past and from ancient past. They've never done so. Somehow, they've also adopted the African behavior that, well, the president really shouldn't, be found in prison. Well, South Africa has set the light. So I hope that the United States will also borrow a leaf from this.
While still on Africa, Prof, Ethiopia is another flashpoint that we've seen in recent times. The battle with the Tigray forces has been going on there. Now, the government has announced a ceasefire, but the Tigrayan forces are saying, no, we've just taken back our capital. Where do you see this going, Prof? And do you see a true ceasefire on the horizon at all?
Yeah. You've asked me, where do I see this going? I see a lot of tears and bloodshed. Obviously, what I have always feared, some people, some countries provided weapons for the Tigray national movement. Arms dealers have got involved. Where this money had come from, I don't know. We will know. I mean, nothing really is ever hidden, at least not in international politics. We will soon know. But what has happened in the past 48 hours in Ethiopia, I don't have a clue. Something strange has gone on. I don't buy the story of unilateral declaration of ceasefire, even though the government in Addis Ababa said so. I think there's more to it than this, but I really don't know. But the consequences of this is that the central government is going to relaunch, especially if the Tigray National Liberation Movement seeks now to expand its activities beyond the capital, Makelele, and try to move to other provinces. Then the central government is going to relaunch its activities. I believe that after they've recaptured, after the central government has recaptured the Tigray capital, it may then be prepared for negotiations. Don't forget that in the Ethiopian constitution, there is a provision that allows provinces to break away. This is what happened with Eritrea. After that constitution was adopted, it's one of the few constitutions, if not the only one, that I'm aware of in Africa that has a provision for a province to break away, to secede if it wants to. So Up till now, that was not the aim of the Tigray National Liberation Movement, because it was the major force in the central government for almost the past 30 years. It was after he lost out power when this new prime minister came in that he then started talking about autonomy. Now, whether in view of the war that has now happened and the accusations and counter accusations of, genocide and what have you, it will now actually ask to be allowed to secede. We will just have to wait and see. But I don't understand the past 48 hours in the history of Ethiopia.
Prof, let's move to Russia. You spoke extensively about Russia last week, particularly the issue around whether shots were fired or not at a UK warship. Now, in the course of the week, since that program, Putin himself has said that they could have sunk the UK warship for entering into their territorial waters illegally, and it wouldn't have started World War III. Do you share his views on that?
Well, let me make one correction. I didn't say that shots were not fired at the ship. In fact, I said shots were fired, but that the intention was not to sink the ship. And there were bombs dropped by planes flying over, but though the bombs were not targeting the ship, the bombs were targeting what sailors call the path of a warship, so that it gives that warship some time to make a diversion. And the British ship did make a diversion, a slight diversion to, both played games that they knew the rules. Now, and Putin is right that if they had wanted to sink the ship, they could have sunk it. But I'm not sure I agree with him that it wouldn't have started a third world war. I don't think I agree with him. This is how, decision makers mistake. Take decisions by mistaking what the anticipation of the other side will be. Hitler made that mistake, having first, entered was it Czechoslovakia, and got away with it. He then decided he would go into Poland, or maybe to the other way around. And his army officers warned him, but like every dictator, he told his generals they didn't know what they were talking about, that Britain was not going to react. And Britain then decided to react after they crossed the red line. I don't think you will have sunk one of Her Majesty's ships and got away with it. I think that will have activated the NATO treaty, and one is an attack on all. So Putin may be mistaken on that line. I don't see any prime minister in Britain that will survive with one of Her Majesty's naval ships being sunk, and there will be no reaction.
Thank you for that, Prof. Let's look at some news coming out from the United States, and we're kind of seeing things within the country and outside the country affecting the U.S. Let's start with some of the victories and get your reaction on that. And that is this issue of the infrastructure bill that has now been passed, $715 billion going to infrastructure development in the United States. Again, this is a win for the Biden administration. Has he done enough to start to get more people to buy into his vision for the country?
Well, the bill you are referring to was passed by the House of Representatives, 221 to 207, the vote. It still has to go to the Senate. Now, what will be its fate in the Senate is a big question mark. Things are a bit muddled because there's that infrastructural, not bill, infrastructural understanding between some Republicans and some Democrats in the Senate. And Biden has said he will not, even if that is approved by the Senate and goes to the House of Rep and approved, he will not sign it unless he gets the other aspect of the infrastructural program that he has sent to them. It's a good step forward, but given the way the Senate is structured in the United States, we saw the loss of the Civil Rights Bill just last week. The Republicans will not even allow it to be debated because, again, that quaint provision, dealing with that needs 2/3 vote. 60, I'm sorry, that needs 60 votes of majority. And, the man that is actually surprising me is, what's his name now? He had never been, a Trump Republican senator. He's supposed to be close to Biden, and yet he's never voted once for anything Biden has sent to the Senate. And yet he was the one who got booed by his Republican constituents 2 or 3 months ago or so. He's never for once voted for anything Biden has sent. So to think that there is no Republican who believes in civil rights, I'm shocked. I'm surprised about that. It was 50-50 because it needed 60 votes. Kamala Harris could not use her own vote as the presiding officer in the Senate. So anything coming from House of Rep, I don't know. I refuse to get all worked up until I see what the Senate is going to do about it.
There's another point, Prof, and this one relates to the Supreme Court in the United States, where they have voted in favor and they have ruled in favor of voter restrictions, a law that some lower courts had said that was disproportionate to blacks, Latinos, and Native American voters. What is your view on that, Prof? Because if indeed another court has seen this as disproportionate to a segment. What are your views? And I know you've been involved in voter reforms and electoral reforms before. Is this the right thing they should be doing?
The law is what 9 judges of the Supreme Court ultimately says it is. Talking about another surprising decision taken this week by this time by the Supreme Court of the Pennsylvania state. One of the commentators said, and I'm using her exact words, we don't have a system of justice in America. We have a system of laws. More often than not, people think anything by law is justice, or any decision taken by a court is justice. Absolutely not. When you are lucky and you get a coterminous between justice and law, that is just pure law. And what we've just seen in the United States Supreme Court, maybe the Supreme Court is starting to show its conservative, finally, is removing the mask where it's beginning to have, some elements of liberalism. It's now showing us its true conservative color, because that's not just the only decision. There was another decision, again, made by 6 votes to 3, again, upholding the conservativeness of his ideology. So I'm not surprised at all that the Supreme Court will take this kind of decisions that have come out this week.
Prof, there's one particular one that I want to put to you. And we've seen President Biden flex the U.S. muscle twice now in terms of ordering airstrikes on armed militia that have attacked U.S. personnel. And we saw this in Syria and in Iraq, where U.S. forces had bombed these groups. Now they are retaliating. Is this going to escalate into another war?
No. Things between the United States and quote unquote surrogates of Iran usually operate at a subliminal level. It never becomes a full-scale war. I think Iran is smart enough to avoid a full-scale confrontation with the United States. It will all continue to be neat pricks, where each one will attack the other, but we're sure that the casualties will be minimal, and as such, the retaliation will also be minimal. And at times, even the United States may not do it directly. It may leave it to its ally in the Middle East to do it on his behalf. So we are not looking for a full-scale war. I don't think Biden wants a full-scale war in the Mediterranean. He has said that he has enough of his agenda, that he doesn't want to be tied down in trying to, he doesn't want to get enmeshed in the Middle East. So he will pick targets that will not provoke a full-scale war. And I think that the surrogates of Iran, or to use a more polite term, the allies of Iran will also retaliate in such a way that they will feel honor has been served without provoking the United States.
Prof, in the few minutes that we have left, how would you rate American foreign policy with some of the initiatives that we're seeing in countries, particularly after the G7 summit? Some of the things happening in Iran, as we've just spoken about, Afghanistan, they're still moving ahead with pulling out troops from that area. How would you rate the Biden administration on their foreign policy stance?
Well, if there is anyone who has access to President Biden and top members of his administration, I would say it's time to go back to the drawing. It's not too late. You've miscalculated at the beginning. Maybe you can go and recalibrate what your role in the world will be. Why do I say this so definitely? Russia was the first to say, if you pick on me, you will regret it. And today, the Chinese leader made the speech. You know, they are celebrating is it 100 years of the founding of the Communist Party. He made a speech and said China will not be bullied anybody again, that era was over, and that anybody who sought to bully China will knock his head against a wall of steel. That's just what the Chinese leader said. So on one hand, you've had Putin use almost the exact, if not almost, this exact message, but not using the same words. And now China has said the same thing. We are powerful enough that you push us around. We are powerful enough, you cannot pick on us. If you do, we will retaliate. Well, how more blunt can you get than that, coming from the leaders of both countries? I think that there is a need for Biden to recalibrate his foreign policy goals, especially towards Russia and towards China.
Prof, we've got just 3 minutes to the end of the program. And there is one question here that I want to put to you. You could choose to reject this at this point, but there is a question here, Prof, where the United States and also the UN has accused Russia of having mercenaries in Central Africa Republic. Why would Russia be in Central Africa Republic, Prof? Russians have denied it, and they've said, nope, it's not us. But the stance is they have been leading, Russians have been leading the attacks that are going on there.
Well, I've always warned about the danger of parachuting into an issue because you miss the beginning and you don't know where you are heading. What's happening in the Central African Republic goes back years. The more immediate cause of this civil war started about 3 or 4 years ago. And I even remember a former Nigerian head of state calling attention to what was going on in the Central African Republic as a contestation between two groups, unfortunately with religious connotations. One is a minority group which insists on ruling Central African Republic. The other, the majority, they've had 2 elections, albeit not perfect. But then which African country has had a perfect election? But they have been elected. Minority group has refused to take part in the election or to recognize the outcome of the election. The minority group has been funded both with weapons and other, if you like, militia from different West African countries. Now, if I were president of Central African Republic, I wouldn't sit there and allow this minority militia to overrun my country. And I really believe that Russian troops are there. But I think they are Russian militia or mercenaries. If you want to use a more pejorative term, mercenaries had come in to help the central government. Of course, the problem with mercenaries is that you can't control their behavior. So I believe that it is true that the Russian mercenaries are there. I believe that a central government has a legitimate right to call in, if you like, mercenaries from other countries. I mean, after all, the British Army, does it not have the from Nepal, those absolutely brilliant, ferocious, courageous troops? I've forgotten their official title. But
Are you talking about the Gurkhas?
The Gurkhas, thank you. Britain used them in when Britain went to fight in the Pacific. They used them there, and Britain is prepared to use the Gurkhas anywhere. They're not British, they're Nepalese, but they're some of the best fighters in the world. So what is the big deal if an African country then calls Russia to assist it in putting down a militia? What's the big deal? What is new about that?
Prof, thanks for your insight. We have run out of time this evening, but we will be back again next week, as usual. Thank you also to our viewers who have remained on here right from the start. Thank you, Prof. We'll see you again next week. Thank you, Prof.
Wakanga.
Yes, sir.
Peace.
Bye, and bye to our viewers.